Here is something that requires specific attention before anything else in this episode is said. On June 13th, 2005, after 13 months of one of the most extensively covered criminal trials in American history, a jury of 12 citizens in Santa Maria, California, delivered verdicts on 14 criminal counts against Michael Jackson. Not guilty on all 14 counts. This is the legal record. It is not disputed. It is the outcome of a criminal justice process that examined the specific allegations against Michael Jackson in the most thorough and public manner that the American legal system provides, with representation on both sides of considerable quality, and with a jury that took its responsibility seriously across weeks of deliberation. What the verdict settles is the criminal question. The prosecution did not prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a high standard, the highest standard that the American legal system applies, and the jury found that the evidence did not meet it. What the verdict does not settle is what actually happened. Not guilty is not the same as innocent. Not proven is not the same as false. The criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt exists precisely because the legal system has decided that it is better to let a guilty person go free than to convict an innocent one, which means that acquittals, by design, do not establish innocence. They establish that the prosecution's evidence was insufficient. This episode tells the story of the trial honestly. It presents the allegations, the defense, the verdict, and the questions that the verdict leaves open. It does not claim to know what the jury could not establish. This is Episode 5, the second allegation, the trial, the acquittal, and everything it did not resolve. The Martin Bashir documentary is the most consequential self-inflicted wound of Michael Jackson's career, and understanding why it happens requires understanding the specific quality of Michael Jackson's relationship to his own public image in the years following the 1993 settlement. He has spent the decade since the Chandler settlement living with the specific biographical weight of public accusation that has not been criminally prosecuted, but has not been fully refuted, the zone of ambiguity that the settlement produced, in which neither side of the public debate about his innocence or guilt has been given the definitive answer that a criminal trial would have provided. The ambiguity is corrosive in the specific way of ambiguity about the worst possible things. It cannot be resolved by continued assertion of innocence, because the assertion of innocence is exactly what a guilty person would also produce. And it cannot be resolved by the passage of time because the specific allegations age without losing their force. He agrees to give Martin Bashir, a British journalist whose profile has been built on a documentary interview with Princess Diana that produced enormous controversy and viewing figures, access for a documentary that will eventually be broadcast as Living with Michael Jackson in February 2003. The decision reflects the specific thinking of someone who believes that extended, controlled access will produce a more sympathetic portrait than the media scrutiny of the previous decade, and whose judgment about what extended access to Martin Bashir will produce turns out to be catastrophically wrong. Bashir spends 8 months with Michael. He films at Neverland during shopping trips, in conversations about Michael's relationship to children and to his own childhood and to the specific practices that the 1993 investigation examined. The footage he accumulates covers the full range of Michael's interior world, the genuine warmth and gentleness, and the specific childlike quality of his engagement with the world, and also the specific practices and statements that a hostile editorial frame can present as confirmation of the worst fears about who he is. The documentary airs in the United Kingdom in February 2003 and in the United States the following night on ABC. 27 million Americans watch it. What they see is Michael Jackson holding hands with a 12-year-old boy named Gavin Arvizo and saying, in response to a question about whether he shares his bedroom with children, that he sees nothing wrong with it, that it is the most loving, beautiful thing. That a man can share his bedroom with a child, and that only people with dirty minds would find this problematic. The statement lands with the force of something that cannot be walked back. Not because it contains an admission of criminal conduct, it does not, and Michael's lawyers immediately point this out, but because the combination of the statement and the image of his hand in a child's hand, and the specific context of a documentary that has been edited to present the most troubling possible version of what Bashir has filmed, produces, in the viewing audience, a response that the most carefully prepared denial cannot adequately address. Gavin Arvizo is 13 years old. At the time of the documentary's broadcast, he is a cancer survivor whose family has been close to Michael for several years. The specific, intense Michael Jackson friendship with a child and his family that the pattern established with the Chandlers has repeated with the Arvizos. The total attention and the gifts and the access that Michael provides to the children he adopts into his inner circle. The Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office opens an investigation within weeks of the documentary's broadcast. Tom Sneddon, the same prosecutor who led the 1993 investigation against Michael Jackson and who did not then have sufficient evidence to bring criminal charges, now has a complainant who is willing to testify and who provides, through the investigation, specific allegations of criminal conduct. Michael Jackson is arrested on November 20th, 2003. The arrest is conducted with the specific theatrical visibility that the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department applies to it. Michael is taken from a private jet, transported in handcuffs, photographed in what becomes one of the most scrutinized and discussed mugshots in the history of American law enforcement. The images go around the world within hours. The charges are 14 in number. They include child molestation, attempted child molestation, and conspiracy. The conspiracy charge covering the allegation that Michael and his associates took steps to prevent the Arvizo family from leaving Neverland and speaking to the media or investigators after the Bashir documentary created the conditions for an investigation. The trial begins in January 2005 and continues for 5 months. It is conducted in the Santa Maria Courthouse, a small Central California city chosen for its distance from Los Angeles and its theoretically more neutral jury pool, with the specific daily intensity of a proceeding in which every detail of the allegations and every detail of the defense are examined in public and assessed by a media that covers the trial with the comprehensive attention of a cultural event rather than a legal proceeding. The prosecution's case rests primarily on Gavin Arvizo's testimony and the testimony of his family members. Gavin takes the stand and describes, in specific detail, alleged acts of molestation. His mother, Janet Arvizo, is also called as a witness, and her testimony, which is intended to corroborate the conspiracy charges, becomes one of the prosecution's most significant problems when cross-examination reveals elements of her history and her statements that the defense uses to undermine her credibility with the jury. The defense presents a picture of Gavin Arvizo and his family that is substantially different from the prosecution's portrait of innocent victims. Janet Arvizo's history includes a civil lawsuit against J.C. Penney, in which she alleged that security guards assaulted her and her children, a lawsuit that was settled and that the defense uses to suggest a pattern of making false allegations for financial gain. Her conduct during the period when she was supposedly being held against her will at Neverland is documented in ways that the defense presents as inconsistent with captivity. Shopping trips, visits to a day spa, interactions with the public that were not limited in the ways that imprisonment would require. Star Arvizo, Gavin's brother, testifies as a prosecution witness and provides testimony that the defense characterizes as internally inconsistent, accounts of specific events that change in detail between his grand jury testimony and his trial testimony, in ways that the defense argues reflect fabrication rather than the normal inconsistencies of memory. The defense also calls a series of witnesses who testify to the specific character of Michael Jackson's relationships with children, people who have been in his presence over extended periods and who describe interactions that are warm, generous, entirely physical in the way of someone who is demonstrably tactile with everyone rather than specifically focused on children in sexual ways. Macaulay Culkin takes the stand. He testifies that his relationship with Michael Jackson was entirely innocent, that nothing inappropriate occurred between them, and that the allegations against Michael are false. His testimony delivered with the specific, direct clarity of someone who has been asked this question many times and whose answer has never changed, is one of the most powerful moments of the defense case. The jury deliberates. They have heard 14 charges and weeks of testimony and thousands of pages of evidence, and they have been sequestered in a way that makes the extended deliberation a particular kind of pressure. They return their verdict on June 13th, 2005. Not guilty on all 14 counts. The courthouse erupts outside, where thousands of Michael Jackson supporters have maintained a vigil. The crowd erupts. Michael is surrounded by his security team and driven away from the courthouse with the specific, dazed quality of someone who has just been through something that no amount of psychological preparation can fully equip a person for. Not the jubilation of the exonerated, but the specific, complicated exhaustion of someone who has spent 14 months in the most public possible examination of the worst possible accusations, and who has emerged with a verdict that is not the same as vindication. He flies to Bahrain that evening. He does not return to Neverland. He will never live there again. The years between the acquittal and the "this is it" announcement are the years of dispersal. Michael in Bahrain, then in Ireland, then in Las Vegas, the specific geography of someone who has been expelled from the fixed location of their identity and who is looking for the next place without finding it. The financial situation is a disaster of a magnitude that the outside world does not fully understand until after his death. Neverland is mortgaged, the loan taken against the property's value to address the debts that accumulate through the years of reduced commercial activity and the enormous legal costs of the trial and the lifestyle that the Neverland operation requires. The total debt is in the hundreds of millions. The estate that was built to replace a childhood is in the process of being claimed by the financial system in the specific, unglamorous way that real property is claimed when its owner can no longer service the debt. The Invincible album, released in 2001 before the Bashir documentary and the trial that followed it, is the last studio album of his career, and its commercial underperformance relative to his previous work is the product of multiple forces. The changed musical landscape of the early 2000s, the ongoing commercial impact of the 1993 allegations on radio airplay, a dispute with Sony that produces the specific public bitterness of Michael accusing the label of deliberately suppressing the album's promotion. The dispute with Sony is real and documented. Michael speaks publicly about Tommy Mottola, the Sony music chairman, calling him a devil and a racist and accusing him of working against Michael's commercial interests. The accusations are the specific, biographical expression of a man who has always experienced institutional relationships through the lens of the power differential that his fame creates, and who has never fully trusted the motives of the institutions that benefit from his work. Whether the Sony dispute is a genuine conspiracy or the persecution narrative of someone whose judgment has been distorted by the drugs and the isolation, both of which are real and documented, is not something the available evidence resolves. The children, Prince Michael, Paris, and the third child, Prince Michael II, known as Blanket, born through a surrogate in 2002, travel with him through the years of displacement, raised in hotel suites and rented houses in the specific transient circumstances of a family organized around a man who no longer has a stable base of operations. Michael veils them in public with the same intensity that he applied at Neverland. The protective instinct of a father who understands what public exposure does to children operating in the new, more exposed context of a life no longer conducted within the walls of a private estate. He is lonely. This is documented in the accounts of people who are around him in these years. The specific, biographical loneliness of someone who has always had difficulty with genuine peer relationships and who now has fewer resources for managing that difficulty. The dependency on propofol, the anesthetic being used as a sleep aid, is escalating through this period in ways that Dr. Conrad Murray, hired as Michael's personal physician in 2009, will later describe as alarming, but that he addresses through the specific, accommodating medical practice of someone whose job security depends on the satisfaction of his patient. The announcement of the This Is It concerts in March 2009 produces the specific, enormous response of an audience that has been waiting for exactly this, the return of the most gifted popular music performer of the 20th century, the opportunity to see the thing they had begun to believe they might never see again. 50 dates at the O2 Arena in London. Every ticket sold within hours. Michael begins rehearsals. The footage of those rehearsals, compiled and released as the This Is It documentary after his death, shows him at 50, still extraordinary, the talent undiminished, the body struggling, but the artistry intact. He is rehearsing for the concerts. He is also being administered propofol by Dr. Conrad Murray in a Los Angeles rented house on a nightly basis, the anesthetic functioning as a sleep aid for a man whose body has forgotten how to sleep without it. June 25th, 2009, is coming. He does not know this. He is learning the choreography for a concert that will never happen. Episode 6, This Is It, the final rehearsals. The morning of June 25th, the end. And the legacy that a life produced and a death amplified. This is Legends of America.